Hey guys, so on this episode of Make It with Calvin, I'm removing the exhaust here on my 96 Civic DX so that way I can do a repair on it. Before we go any further, no part of me is under this car that doesn't have to be for safety reasons. Obviously, if you're going underneath your car, logic, common sense, and don't stick anything valuable underneath there definitely applies. So let me work on getting the exhaust out and then I'll explain to you why I'm doing this. Okay, something to note here is it's not uncommon for these bolts to get rusted in, especially if you're in one of those states that gets this thing called snow and you have to deal with a lot of salt. So what I've done is a couple days ago, I sprayed the fasteners down with some penetrating lubricant, let it sit, and then just very gently rock the fasteners back and forth until it started to let go. But now I can more easily undo the fasteners, which is good. So I'm just going to gently undo them. I'm going to alternate because there are the springs. One bolt assembly out. Two bolt assembly out. Perfect. So now I can work on dropping out the exhaust on the other end. All right, so I'm here at the back of the car. I'm going to assume, man, this thing's heavy, that we're just going to pop it off these rubber deals. There we go. Okay, let me get a screwdriver for that one. Okay, that was elegant. Man, this thing's heavy. Okay, I finally got the exhaust out. The muffler assembly. Gosh dang, that was a pain and a half, but let me work on getting this over to the workshop and then we'll discuss the repair from there. Okay, now that I got it inside, I'm going to talk a little bit about this absolutely disgusting weld job on here. In short, what happened is the connection between the pipe here into the muffler pretty much got rotted out over time, and it got to the point where the exhaust pipe was starting to flex away and the inside of my car sounded, well, just absolutely terrible. So what I ended up doing was just some really crappy welds with my friend's flux core welder. It was a horrible setup that I had going on, but it's all I could do at the moment. That held for a bit, but because of our wonderful, wonderful roads here in California, eventually that failed, so I went back and added some more weld, but it was bad. Just don't weld on a long extension cord with a flux core welder with ancient welding wire. It doesn't work. So what the plan is I'm going to try and grind down as much of this absolute appalling mess right there as I can, and then I'm going to come along with my torch and do a little bit of brazing because I figure a braze will flow better. Then while I'm at it, I'm going to try and install some kind of a brace. I have a couple of ideas. I grabbed some wire over at the local Ace Hardware, so I'm kind of thinking of putting a piece that runs like here, and then I'll probably keep the hose clamp on here to hold it in place, and then runs along this as well, so it really helps support it. So if for whatever reason the terrible weld braze job here fails, there's something mechanically locking it in place, so hopefully it won't go anywhere. One other word of warning I will say is, more likely than not, this has zinc on it, and especially when you are heating it up to weld or braze, you do not want to be breathing that in. So when it comes time to doing that, I am probably going to do it outside, and I also have a respirator for welding, but I can't stress that enough. Zinc fume fever is not a joke, and it's bad. Okay, so let me work on getting this absolute abomination ground down, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I'm gonna say that's probably good enough. It's all holding in there. It does not need to be pretty. It just needs to hold, because I really don't feel like buying a new muffler just because that happened. So let me haul this outside, get all the equipment out there, and then we'll actually braze this silly thing up. All right, so now it's time to braze things up. I personally like to use a little bit of extra flux on this just in case. I am using these super awesome Lincoln Electric pre-fluxed brazing rods, but because this material is pretty grody, it helps to have a little bit more. Pretty much any decent hardware store, welding supply store sells these, and honestly, if you have a torch set, keeping these around, they are so handy to work with, but it never hurts to have a little bit extra. This stuff's more in a pasty configuration. It's somewhat dried out over time, but you know what? Still has enough moisture to work. In this application, I think it works better than dry flux, where you would have to heat the part up and then apply the flux and then wait for it to turn kind of glassy and all that stuff. But I'll show you guys. So I'm just going to glob on a very generous amount of flux onto here for the first joint. We'll get the torch fired up and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I'm going to do my best to one-hand this and yell over the roar of the torch, but you'll see how the flux is getting kind of bubbly and it's already starting to change color. That's a good sign. I'm just going to slowly heat the flux and the surrounding metal just so that way it has time to chemically attack any remaining junk that's on there. And don't be scared to come back and reapply more flux, especially if it decides it wants to kind of run away like it's doing there, because I really want the flux in that joint, not rolling down the pipe. But you can see how it's already starting to flow on there, steel is getting hot, so that's good. So we'll heat up the base tube a little bit. Get that glowing. All right, I'm going to apply a little more flux to that, and then we'll come along and actually hit it with the torch proper. As well is you can kind of move the flux around using the heat of the torch. So don't be scared to try and manipulate it a little bit, but on a surface like this, it will want to run. Now I'm going to focus the heat on the base metal here, because the rod's going to heat up really, really fast, and the base metal is going to take longer. Alright, I can see it starting to glow in my goggles, so now I'm going to heat the filler. Yeah, oh, that is flowing nice. So I'm going to go over it a couple of times, just to really make sure that we get a good solid joint in there. Yeah. Might not melt the GoPro doing this. Oh yeah. That isn't going anywhere. So the nice thing about brazing is if for whatever reason I wasn't super happy with this, I can always just come back and hit this again with the torch if I really felt the need to. But honestly, I think it's good. So I'm just going to let this air cool, and then we're going to come on back and tackle the vertical portion, which is definitely going to be a little bit trickier, but I'm actually going to keep it in the vertical position just to show how I would attack something like that. Then once we're all done, we'll come along and clean off the excess flux, because we don't want to leave that forever because it can kind of corrode things. Okay, let's tackle the vertical guy, shall we? Same as before, we're going to flux it up. Only in this case, I'm intentionally putting the flux on the top of it, because naturally when it gets hot, it's going to want to run down. So with that in mind, let's fire up the torch and just gently warm it up. All right, I think that's on there. So like before, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let it cool, and then I'll just carefully either bend over and braze on or grind off that little nubbins. So you know what? Yeah, let me just braze that on there for a little bit of extra strength. But I'm going to let this cool for a bit, and then we'll come on back and clean the flex off. Okay, so this is the zinc that I was warning about. You see that white powdery stuff? Yeah, you don't want to breathe that in. So I'm going to go dig up some kind of respiratory protection, and then we'll come along with the absolutely terrifying wire wheel and knock this off. This is pretty much cooled down to darn near room temperature. But it's interesting, you can see with the flux how it changes color and collects all kinds of just nasty stuff that doesn't make things stick. But this joint up here is more than strong enough, that joint down there is more than strong enough, and that piece of hammered dog poop is more than strong enough. Like I said, this does not need to look pretty, it just needs to hold up until, you know, the end of my car, which hopefully will not be anytime soon. So let me go work on that, get that off, and then get this back in the car. Alright, so if it isn't super obvious, I'm back underneath the car, and now it's time to fight with these stupid rubber thingies again, albeit putting them on is a lot easier, so that's nice. On you go. And wow, that was easy. Okay, so now we can scoot down to where everything joins up, put the hardware back in, and we'll be done. And as with before, I'm not sticking any more of me under here than I absolutely have to, because, you know, safety first and all that stuff. Nice thing is the hardware is just long enough that it fits in there. You know what? I think I'm going to run and put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads, just on the off chance that I have to pull this out again. I want to make sure that they aren't going to get all rusted in there. So I will be right back and we'll put them in. Okay, I'm back. I have a little bit of anti-seize on here. The main idea is when I pulled these out, they were definitely a little bit corroded in there. And I do travel to states that salt their roads for snow and ice removal. So I definitely, in case I have to pull this out in the future, I just want to make it easier for me, and it's just not a bad idea. So just gonna get that guy in there a couple of turns. Helps if you pull the parts together a little bit. And we'll do the same for the top guy. But I will definitely say I'm happy that I took the time to fix this myself, because I'm not entirely sure how much a new exhaust would cost. But I'm all for fix if you don't need to buy. All right, I'm going to call that in there. That feels good and solid. I'm a happy camper. I gotta go clean my hands off. They're a little grimy. Hope you guys found this useful, and I'll see you here next time on Make It Look Out. Also, I want to take a minute and plug my friend Jamie and her soap. This is something that I actually helped inspire. It's called the Dude Bar, and it's got walnut shell in it. And let's just say my hands are kind of dirty, and what's on here doesn't like to come off super easily. So put our Dude Bar to the test. Get some water on it. It definitely doesn't lather up as much as commercial soaps, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work any better. Oh man, that's really taking it off. Get any of the nasty trim off. I call that clean.